Oh yeah, what's up everybody? I'm Ollie, your real life English fluency coach. So this lesson is about why you don't need to speak like a native to be a confident, fluent English speaker. But before we get into that, ask yourself this very important question. Is it even possible to speak like a native? Well, in my humble opinion, yes, you can get to a level that's pretty close to that of a native speaker. But it requires a lot of hard work and dedication. So it's largely dependent on whether or not you can or want to put in that work. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll cover that in a little bit. This lesson is pretty straightforward, and it has two sections. First, I'll answer the question in more detail than what I just did. Is it possible to speak like a native? And then I will tell you why it's okay if you don't sound like a native or if you don't want to sound like a native. So this lesson is for you if you are passionate about English and would like to think deeply about this topic. If your goal is indeed to speak like a native, if your goal isn't to speak like a native and you want to know why, that's perfectly fine. And if you feel insecure about your English level, this lesson is the reassurance that you need. But before we start, we help you understand fast speech, be understood by anyone, and connect to this beautiful world that we live in. We help people like Nan. And Nan says that our channel does more than teach English. It helps you develop the right mindset to continue to improve your English. So join Nan and over 200,000 learners from all around the world by hitting that subscribe button and the bell down below so you don't miss any of our new lessons. Is it possible to speak like a native? For me, there are three factors that determine whether or not you can achieve a proficiency level that's just like a native English speaker. But what is a native English speaker? You might be asking yourselves. Well, I'm a native English speaker. Ethan is a native English speaker. Andrea is a native English speaker. We all come from different countries. So there's always the question that, okay, you want to sound like a native speaker. But a native speaker from where? Anyway, these three factors are exposure, dedication, and age. Age? What do you mean? People say that you can learn anything, no matter what age you are. That's true, but let's consider that in relation to the other two factors at play. We're going to use this diagram here to help illustrate these ideas. Let's invent a character. Let's call him Lucas. Let's say Lucas is here at age 0. In other words, he's a newborn, and on exposure, let's put him at the right-hand edge of this spectrum. He lives in an English-speaking country. Here, the other factor, dedication, is out of the picture. We could set him at none here, and he would still learn English. He's going to be a native English speaker because he was born in an English-speaking country. That's me. I was born in Australia. I never made an effort to learn English. I just learned it naturally. Now that we've established that case, let's focus on the other hypothetical cases in which Lucas is actually a learner of English as a second language. Let's now increase Lucas's age. He's 9 and he's just gone from here, no exposure, all the way to here, living in an English-speaking country. What this basically means is that Lucas has moved to an English-speaking country. He's still quite young, so even if he doesn't make a big effort to learn the language, he will probably still be able to learn it to the level of a native and be bilingual. That means that he will still have, practically speaking, native English level, and through life, even if he never moves back to where he was born, he will still be a native speaker of his mother tongue. By definition, this is a bilingual speaker. Of course, this is still a generalization, because who knows how many factors could be at play in someone's life. But for discussion's sake, we'll leave it at that. By the way, the reason I put 9 here at the middle of the spectrum is because this is the age, give or take, it might be 9, 11, maybe 12, where it becomes more and more difficult to acquire a native-like accent. It's not impossible though. We have interviewed Hadar and Anna on our talk show Beyond Borders with Ethan, where they told us how they achieved their incredible accents. Anyway, let's say now another character, Zoe. She started learning English somewhere between 15 and 22. It doesn't matter. She doesn't move, nor has the opportunity to visit an English-speaking country. But she tries her best to make up for that by watching a lot of TV in English, reading books, etc. Her dedication is extremely high. What level can she achieve? She could land anywhere along the right-hand end of this line. C2 is a very advanced English level. You might not be a native English speaker, but English won't be an impediment for almost anything. Like Zoe, you can also get exposed to the English language with our exclusive real-life native immersion course. Over 41 weeks, we will take you on a journey of the English language. You will learn about culture, why and how natives speak so fast, and lots more. And I want you to try it for free today with our 3-part Power Learning series. To sign up and get started, you can click up here, and I'll also leave a link down in the description below. What are you waiting for? Now, imagine if someone is like Zoe, but instead of starting to learn English in their early 20s, they start when they are 40. And in my opinion, this person wouldn't be at a disadvantage because they're older. You know, I'm talking about this idea that the older you get, the less ability you have to learn something, right? I hear this all the time. And quite frankly, I don't believe in that. However, someone at this age, as a full-grown adult, is going to have a very different life than most people in their 20s. They might have a job that obviously demands a lot out of them. They might have kids to raise and all sorts of other responsibilities. So age can have an impact on your ability to dedicate yourself to your learning and how much exposure you can actually get. Now, assuming that you're older than 9, which would be totally safe to assume, right? Let's change the question, can you speak like a native, to just how proficient or fluent can you get in English? The answer is, it will depend on how much exposure and dedication you have. Let's move on to the second part of this lesson. Why you don't need to sound like a native. So there's a reason why I said sound like a native and not speak like a native. The idea behind sounding like a native implies modifying your accent so it's closer to that of a native from a specific place, while speaking like a native implies the broader idea of fluency, and it might not so much be focused on accent. We'll talk more about accent in a second, but for me, what's most important is the question of whether someone's proficiency in a second language allows them to have the same type of opportunities that they would in their native language. That is, despite it being a second language, you've learned it so well that you can excel in an environment where that English is spoken or be in a relatively level playing field among those who speak it as a first or native language. Now, when it comes to accent, it might come as no surprise that there are many English learners who do want to be exposed to a native speaker accent and will make an effort to sound as closely as possible to a native English speaker. Some people say that that is a good goal because if you set a very ambitious goal for yourself and you make a big effort to attain it, even if you don't, you're going to have a very high English level. The famous quote by Oscar Wilde goes, "Shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars." We recently had the pleasure of speaking to Hadar Shemesh from Accents Way English with Hadar in our brand new talk show Beyond Borders with Ethan. She was kind enough to share with us her process of achieving an incredible American accent. And she also talked about how she had to deal with perfectionism.
I do have the privilege of sounding like a native speaker for the most part. And as a result, you know, I do have access to things that people with an accent don't have. I do have access to people who don't sound like an American, who don't have a standard accent, don't have. So I recognize that. And I think that the result, like what we see now, is the result of, you know, the first few years of me dealing with English, being a perfectionist, and recognizing that it has changed my the way I speak, but it also created a lot of insecurities because at some point my English level, I sounded like a native, but my English was not a native English. So I constantly felt insecure again, like an imposter. People are going to hear those mistakes and they're going to be like, what? Oh, we thought that you're a native. So I think that created a lot of insecurities for me. And I have gone through this emotional and mindset transformation around my English and around how I present my English. So I'm now left with the result of the first few years of my journey. But I know the impact that it had and how I could easily fall into that rabbit hole of, constantly feeling like I need to keep on improving my English. But I still think that the internal process is what counts.
You can watch the full interview by clicking up here or down in the description below. Other people, however, will say that instead of trying to sound like a native, why don't you try and sound like yourself? This might connect with a deeper, more psychological question. We recently had Rachel from Rachel's English as a guest in our podcast, and this is what she had to say.
I don't ever want to criticize someone's goal, but let's do talk about that as a goal. In my experience, students who have that as a goal tend to be less happy with where they are. And I think that perspective, definitely slows down progress.
Again, if you want to listen to this podcast episode, I'll link it down in the description. You can also find it on the Real Life app. You can download the app from the Apple app or Google Play stores. Just search for Real Life English. Going back to what I said earlier, there are many learners who do want to strive to sound like, or almost like, a native. However, very frequently, lots of others want to retain their own accent when they speak a foreign language because they feel that it is part of their identity. I personally feel the same when I speak Portuguese. I find it quite a compliment when a taxi driver asks where I am from because I'm a proud Australian. English as second language speakers who have strong accents have at some point made the conscious or unconscious decision that they would not try to pursue a foreign accent, whether it be American, British, or otherwise. In other cases, some speakers are very vague about it. So while someone might have a specific model of English as their goal, others just don't think about it too much. We believe that most learners still desire to improve their accent, but in a context where some might have their reasons for keeping their own accent. Intelligibility has got to be considered the prime goal of pronunciation. Now, back to our conversation with Hadar. She had a message that we would like to emphasize at Real Life English.
And I think that the more people with accents, everyone has an accent, but let's say with an international or a non-American standard accent, dare to show up, the more we normalize different sounds and different voices. And then when there's more representation, then people dare more. Because right now, a child that grows up and watches Hollywood movies and Netflix, then the majority is like the sound of the most of the people who speak is very, very distinct, and it doesn't sound like them. And I think that then they would be afraid to speak up in public or make videos because it doesn't sound right, like English is supposed to sound. And I think that the more we normalize foreign accents, non-native accents, I think we would have more representation, more people would dare, more people would show up.
That leads to some lessons we have done on Learn English with TV series with Sofia Vergara and Deepika Padukone. You can think of other actors as well, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Arnie, and Penelope Cruz. They all have stupendous English, but they speak with an accent. If you ask me about it, this is what makes them unique, interesting, and exotic. So in the end, it's up to you whether or not you want to pursue a native accent in English. What I advise my students to do is to put their focus on clear pronunciation. So even though they might have an accent, what makes them interesting and exotic is that they are easy to understand. I hope today's lesson was insightful for you. Don't forget, we have new lessons every Monday and Friday. Ah, yeah.
You might be familiar with today's guests. So I had a marvelous interview with Emma from English. And today's lesson is an excerpt from that interview that I think could help you a lot on your English learning journey. And after you finish it, be sure to check out the full interview with Emma for free by clicking the link down in the description.